The Senate Judiciary Committee is set to vote on Judge Amy Coney Barrett's nomination to the Supreme Court on October 22nd. The committee wrapped up 4 days of confirmation hearings this week. Judge Barrett is President Trump's pick to fill the seat left by the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Republicans have the votes to send her confirmation to the full floor vote. During the hearings, she was asked about her mentor, the late Justice Antonin Scalia, and how closely she would follow his decisions.
I've already said, and I hope that you aren't suggesting that I don't have my own mind or that I couldn't think independently or that I would just decide, like, oh, let me see what Justice Scalia has said about this in the past, because I assure you I have my own mind. But everything that he said is not necessarily what I would agree with or what I would do if I were Justice Barrett. That was Justice Scalia. So I share his philosophy, but I've never said that I would always reach the same outcome as he did.
For more on this, I want to bring in Nicole Garnett. She's a longtime friend and colleague of Judge Amy Coney Barrett's. Nicole, welcome. Thank you so much for being with us. First off, if you would, tell us how you know. Great to have you. Tell us how you know Judge Barrett and where you've worked with her.
So we first met in 1998. We clerked together on the Supreme Court. I was clerking for Justice Thomas, and she was clerking for Justice Scalia. Right after that, I moved to Notre Dame and joined the faculty. And 3 years later, 3 years after that picture was taken, Amy joined me here on the faculty at Notre Dame. And she and Jesse bought a house around the corner. And we've been close friends ever since. So we sort of shared our lives together, raised our kids together, organized Halloween candy exchanges and trick-or-treating and Easter egg hunts. So she's just sort of been a close friend and a colleague in the law school and previously a co-clerk. So I've known her forever.
And clearly you're in a great position to do things like write letters to senators voicing your support for Judge Barrett, which you did. Tell us what you told them and why you think she should serve on the Supreme Court.
So I think it's important to say that there's so many levels to Amy and why she would be such a wonderful pick. Of course, intellectually, I think what we saw of her, what you see is what you get. Is that she's really has a brilliant legal mind. She didn't have notes. She just, there's the famous picture of her standing up, holding up the notepad. She really just has this amazing capacity to think like a lawyer and think clearly about the law. And so that's wonderful. I mean, I saw that when she was a law professor at Notre Dame. Her students are sort of in awe of her far more than many of the rest of us in the building. That is, they were more in awe of her than they were in awe of us. We were in awe of her too. But she's also just this wonderful, kind, loving, generous soul. I don't know. Yesterday, one of her former students testified about how she helped her as a blind woman and a student. But there's just so many stories about Amy reaching out. She's the first person you look to when you have a crisis. She's the first person to deliver a meal when somebody has a baby or surgery, despite her very, very busy schedule. And she's also quite humble. I think that humility is really important to this job. And she does so many things so well without asking anyone to praise her for it. She just does them because they're the right thing to do.
So let's talk a little bit about her stance on abortion, which, as you know, is an incredibly important issue to so many Americans. Judge Barrett says her personal beliefs will not affect her legal opinions, but she has been very open about her opposition to abortion rights, and she did leave the door open for the Supreme Court to overturn Roe v. Wade. So tell us, is she the reliable conservative voice that activists on the right have been waiting for?
Well, I'll just say, having known Amy Barrett for 22 years, what you get is a very independent woman who has her own mind and won't do anyone else's bidding. And what she will do is to follow the rule of law. She took an oath to uphold the Constitution. As a person of faith, that is a very important thing. She will do as she says. She will call the balls and strikes as they come to her. And it's of course true she didn't pre-commit to making any decision about any particular issue, because it would be totally inappropriate for her, both as a nominee and as a sitting judge, to do so. So is she conservative? Yes, she's a conservative woman. Does she have her own religious beliefs? Of course she does. But she's made quite clear that those things are not on the table when she is sitting as a judge. And we've seen that in over 100 judicial opinions since she joined the Seventh Circuit.
Right.
She's a woman of her word.
Of course, she's also right. And of course, she's also shown that she is open to overturning precedent in certain situations. Could this then be an opportunity for conservative groups to retry some additional big issues like same-sex marriage? We know her mentor, Justice Scalia, was certainly not, did not approve of same-sex marriage.
Well, so there's no sitting judge in the United States that that would say they're opposed to overturning precedent in all cases. Of course, sometimes cases are wrong. Plessy versus Ferguson was wrong. Dred Scott was wrong. We had to have a Brown versus Board of Education to overturn Plessy versus Ferguson, and to have the promise of equality that our nation had for far too long neglected. So, of course, sometimes precedents have to be overturned, and I'm sure she will follow the rules of stare decisis and apply them faithfully. Any case, of course, to get to the Supreme Court, it's not, as she said over and over again in her hearings, it's not exactly like, the court goes and takes polls. It takes a long time for a case to get to the Supreme Court, and litigants try to get all kinds of things there. I don't think we can predict what issues will come up or win. I think what we can know is that she will follow the Constitution, and she will apply the rules of stare decisis as they have been developed over the last 2.5 centuries.
And as you know, the Judiciary Committee is now scheduled to vote to confirm Judge Barrett next Thursday. That is less than 2 weeks before the presidential election. Considering, how contentious some of this has been, do you think her nomination should have waited until after the election?
Well, October 22nd is my anniversary, so it would be a great anniversary present if the Senate would confirm my great friend on my anniversary. I think it's really important to keep in mind that it is not at all unusual for a president to seek to fill a vacancy in the Supreme Court during the last year of a presidential term. It's actually happened 30 times in history. In 19 of those times, the president and the Senate were of the same party, and 17 of those nominees were confirmed. So I don't actually think the timing is inappropriate. The president has the power entrusted him by the founding fathers in the Constitution to fill vacancies for all judicial vacancies. And the Senate has the power to decide whether or not to confirm the nominee. They're both doing their jobs right now.
So let me ask you something. If the Democrats do take over Congress after this next election and decide to add Supreme Court justices to the bench, which is not constitutionally, which is not unconstitutional. It's not mandated in the Constitution how many Supreme Court judges there should be. Since that's also their legal prerogative, would that also be okay?
Well, I hope that they don't. I think 9's a nice number. Of course, the number of justices has varied over time, and that's Congress's prerogative if the president approves. I would say that I think it would be a bad idea. In my view, the Supreme Court, the federal bench generally, has been totally politicized in a very negative way. We ought to not see this as some kind of a super legislature that we can just install more people on it so that we can get our way. Well, that's really the job of Congress and the president in the legislative process. So I very much hope that the president chooses, as did President Roosevelt, not to pack the court. It's a bad idea, and we should let the democratic process play out in the legislature where it belongs.
All right. Well, Nicole Garnett, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time.
Sure. Thanks so much.